Alright guys, welcome back to the shop. So today is currently my birthday, which means that due to societal expectations, I don't get to spend the day doing what I want out in the shop here. It means that I get to spend it around other people. So, not my favorite thing to do, but I will do it anyway. So, what that means is that I'm not going to actually be able to do any progress on the bed frame today like I would have loved to do. I'm really getting into a groove with this maple bed frame. It's actually kind of becoming very enjoyable to work on. Even though it may seem in its recent videos that it's kind of lost its joy, it is a lot of fun. Just because of how big and heavy it is, I really am enjoying working on it. But anyway, what I want to do today is deal with the big problem that I'm currently having in the shop, and that is the shop itself. It is an absolute disaster in here. It looks like a tornado ran through. We've got pretty good tripping hazards everywhere. It's not a safe work environment. There's sawdust all over the floor that, as some of you have pointed out in recent videos, as I'm walking through, I am kicking up some dust and breathing it in. Not great to be doing. So I want to work on cleaning the shop today. But that's not very entertaining for you guys, so I want to answer the one question I get all the time. What brands do I use for such and such thing? Now, if you watch my videos, obviously you've seen certain brands that pop up, you know, very distinct colors in that. But overall, it is worth mentioning that I'm not really a brand loyalist one way or the other. Now, there are certain brands that I go to for certain specific tools, which we'll talk about in just a second here. But overall, I'm pretty open on what tools and machinery I buy for the shop here. I always want to get whatever the best is or whatever the best that I can afford is. And generally speaking, I don't care what brand it is. And honestly, you know, it doesn't matter if it comes from Lee Valley or Walmart. You know, the brand is not as important as the actual functionality of the tool. Now, I will say that in the past, I have made some decisions just purely based on a brand name. We're going to talk about those tools later on, but it does happen. Especially with some of my tools, I just don't care enough and I just go by a brand name that seems trustworthy enough. You know, there's certain things that I don't care that much. I just need a certain tool, and so I go with the one that seems like the best. So, like I said, I'm not really a brand loyalist in one way or another. There are certain brands that I like more than others. But anyway, I'm rambling on. Let's do something here. So first up, obviously we have to talk about Bosch. Now I love Bosch tools, especially their routers. I've got the Colt, I've got the MRP 23, and I've got the 1617 in the little Bosch router deal you can see back there. All of these tools I really like. Obviously I have the one negative review on the Colt here. It's a really good router, it just has that one fundamental flaw, which you guys can see if you go check out that review. But overall, Bosch was heading in the direction of being the brand that I went with for everything. Now the trick with Bosch is that some of their tools are kind of harder to get. Like when I started looking for a track saw, I was really interested in the Bosch track saw. I like the design of it. One of the tools that I do think sets Bosch apart is this little small guy here. Now I know Milwaukee has a similar one, but I really like the Bosch one. It's a little bit cheaper than the Milwaukee, and you can get all the different head attachments for it. But in general, I do really like Bosch tools, so it's a brand that I typically recommend. Again, Colt has some issues, be aware of them. Take better care of your Colt if you get one. Overall, not a bad tool, just has some issues. But honestly, if you are looking for a good router, Bosch, by far, in my opinion, makes the best router, and that's why I have it. Now, it may not compare to Festool or any like the top tier brands. I know there's some weird ones in Europe, but it definitely is a very good router. I've been using and abusing this one through these past two projects, as you guys have seen. So I really do like this router and all of my Bosch tools. You know, the sander, pretty good. This little drill, awesome. The Colt, pretty good. And then obviously we can't talk about tools and some of my favorite brands if we don't talk about Veritas. Now you really can't beat Veritas in my opinion. You know, top tier hand tools, made in Canada, which is just freaking amazing. You know, as a Canadian, I really like being able to support a brand that actually makes stuff in Canada. So that to me is super cool. It is really hard to get Veritas stuff, especially right now. Their supply chain is definitely a little bit slowed down. But I do plan to add more Veritas stuff to my collection in the future. The stuff that I have sitting here is not even all of it. I have planing stops, bench dogs. I have some scrapers in that are Veritas. Veritas really does make a lot of really useful hand tool stuff, and I love their tools. Now, I was recently introduced to Wind River hand planes sold by Rob Kosman out east. Now, the planes are made, I believe they're made in the US, but they're sold by Rob Kosman, who's a pretty popular Canadian woodworker. I only found out about him recently from my buddy Gary. There'll be a link to his channel down below. Definitely go check him out. He's just getting started on YouTube. He's He's still got a fairly small channel. We're trying to get him up over 1,000. So I highly recommend going and checking him out. He's a really good dude. And he makes some really awesome stuff. So there will be a link to his channel down below. But anyway, yeah, he put me on to Rob Kosman, and I've gotten a few comments going and telling me to go check out Rob Kosman's page. And he has a lot of really interesting information, especially talking about the Wind River planes. So I don't know how many more Veritas planes I'm going to introduce, because I really like the look and the style of those Wind River planes. But anyway, Veritas is a brand that I have no issue recommending to people. It's one of the few brands that just by that name, you know you're going to get a good tool. Again, everything chisels, the low angle jack is probably one of my most used tools in the shop. This little routing block plane, the router plane, spoke shapes. I've heard people hate these Veritas dovetail saws. I kind of understand why. It's not the best, but it's a good way to get into cutting dovetails with a Western style saw because it's not crazy expensive. So overall, Veritas is just a really good brand to have in your shop. If you have access to a Lee Valley store, definitely check it out. It's like everywhere I look, setup blocks, dovetail guides, all this stuff is just, all of it's just Veritas. So yeah, it's a brand that I definitely have bought into and I really do like it. Obviously, we can't talk brands without talking about Sawstop. I am a firm believer of if you don't have a Sawstop table saw, you should get one. Now, it's purely because of the safety feature. Plus, Sawstop just makes really good quality tools. Again, this is the one that I have here is the contractor version. It's a lot better than going for the lower powered PCS, in my opinion. You know, you get to save a couple grand. Plus, you're getting all the same power in that, so it's just a really great package, especially because you can get the solid cast iron surface. But if you haven't seen it, Sawstop just released a small job site saw, and I believe right now at Lee Valley it's retailing for about $1,000. Now, if you compare that to the $600 DeWalt saw that I started on, an extra $400 for a thing that can't cut your fingers off is always a good thing in my opinion. So Sawstop has done a really good job of just expanding their abilities to keep people safe. So I'm a big fan of if you're just getting into woodworking or you're an advanced woodworker, Sawstops are just really good tools. Again, I'm not telling you have to get one. I'm not telling you have to upgrade. They are an expensive option, but having a Sawstop has definitely made me feel more comfortable in the shop. So next up is Rikon. Now, if you look around the shop, I've got a few Rikon tools dotted around here. I've got the lathe, I've got the drill press, and obviously I have the bandsaw. Now, the thing that I like the most about Rikon is that it comes from Lee Valley and it has a return policy. Now, that is quite literally the only reason I went with Rikon over Laguna. When I was looking into getting this saw, I was stuck between the Laguna model and the Rikon model, and if I bought the Rikon model from Lee Valley or I bought the Laguna model from a couple different places here in Calgary, the Laguna model didn't have a good return policy on any of them, whereas with this Rikon, if anything went wrong or if I didn't like it, I could just return it. But that doesn't mean that I'm not happy with the brand. I wouldn't have bought more Rikon tools if I didn't like the brand. Now, the nice thing about Rikon is what's available from them is a lot of your intermediate stuff. You know, this is a really good 14-inch bandsaw. Again, if you don't like it, you can return it to Lee Valley. It's great. That's kind of the whole, that's one of the biggest benefits of them. And it is a really good machine. As you guys have seen, I use this to break down stock constantly. I've used it to resaw those big whiteout panels that went into the first bed frame. All that kind of stuff I can do on this saw. It's a really good machine and I highly recommend it. I still can't really get in front of them, but this Rikon drill press, this is a variable speed, it's a benchtop model. It's probably the single best benchtop model drill press that I could find on the market. It's way better than the similar one that's on Amazon, just because of the way the gears are set up. But yeah, overall, awesome machine. This little lathe that I was able to get I can't remember how long the bed extension is, but I can do up to a 42-inch long spindle on here. If you're wanting to get into spindle turning, furniture making, chair making, all that kind of stuff, there's no better lathe on the market in my opinion. If you look at Laguna's small offering, it's way more expensive than this base model that I got, plus the extension that you can buy for it is nowhere near as long as this one. So Rikon is one of the only brands on the market with a small lathe that is ideally set up for spindle turning. Moving down a little bit, DeWalt is one that I'm kind of getting into. So obviously the DeWalt Planer, I love this thing. It was a massive upgrade from my old Ridgid planer that I had that I absolutely hated. So this thing is a beast, especially because you don't have to lock and unlock to change the depths all the time. You just turn the crank. It's super accurate, and I plan to get the spiral, helical, whatever, the fancy cutter head for it at some point in time in the near future here. It is bloody expensive, so I gotta save up for it, but it is an upgrade that I'm really looking forward to make on this thing. Also, when I was doing all that chair making stuff, I went for a DeWalt drill. This is the atomic one, so it's a little bit more compact. I love this thing. It's a lot more powerful than the Ryobi ones I was using before, and just generally it feels a little bit better built. Plus the ratcheting chuck on it is just lovely. So again, I like DeWalt too. It's another good brand. I don't know what to tell you guys. If it's a tool I'm using in my shop on a pretty consistent basis, generally speaking, I'm gonna say I like it. That being said, there are some tools by certain brands like Kreg that I have to use constantly because I can't afford to upgrade it, and it is such a bad item. Anyway, I don't like the Kreg brand. We're gonna move back on to brands that I do like. We won't dwell on this one too much, but SuperMax / Laguna, kind of, maybe, sort of, I don't know, they're linked in some weird way, but SuperMax in general. I don't want to badmouth it because I do think that they're a good brand. I just don't know if this machine is that great. But if you guys have been watching the bed series, you already know what I think of this machine anyway. It is a nice machine to have in the shop. It's got some really good features built into it. Overall, I do really like this machine. It's just one of those machines where anytime you're having to use it, it's just such a pain in the butt to use that you get annoyed really, really quickly. So overall, as much as it may seem from my videos, I don't hate this machine. I do appreciate the fact that this lets me do a lot of things that I wouldn't normally be able to do. And overall, it is a really good machine. But I will go as far to say as I don't know if I would personally recommend SuperMax to someone that is looking to buy things. So we'll leave it at that because, yeah, I have very conflicting feelings about this brand and this machine. And then another brand that I have kind of conflicting feelings about is Ridgid. So, like I said before, the DeWalt Planer that I used to have, I hated that machine. It wasn't very good. Eventually, the rollers gave out. Everything about it just kind of started being stupid. But this Ridgid jointer that I've had right from the beginning, you know, this has been one of the longest lasting tools in my shop. It's been with me since day one, really, of my woodworking career. This is an absolute awesome machine. Again, it has a return policy, so if you find that you bought a jointer and you can't really use it, or you don't really need it in your shop, you can return it, which is great. But overall, it's just been the perfect tool for me for so long. Along with that, the shop vac, you guys will see it pop up constantly. It's a shop vac. It's built fine. I don't know. There's nothing really special. Then also the Ridgid circular saw that you guys see pop up. Again, in the last bed frame project, we talked about how the saw has some issues. What we were trying to use it for in that project was like, super accurate, $600 track saw territory, not $200 circular saw territory. Kind of like using a dump truck as a race car. You can do it, but it's not what it's meant for. And as long as you use it that way, for breaking down stock, this thing is great. The battery power on it, the battery lasts a nice long time. It's got plenty of power to cut through all of the, the 8-quarter hardwoods that I work with. So overall, again, it may seem like I really hate Ridgid sometimes, but overall, that's a brand that I do actually kind of like. This jointer is awesome. The shop vac has been awesome. This circular saw has been pretty awesome for the time that I've had it. So overall, again, another brand that I think is pretty good. I also have their little belt oscillating sander thing that's stuffed on the back wall back there. I love that thing. It's been super useful. Again, it has some issues with it. It's not great, but it is very functional and does work, especially if you're on a bit of a budget and don't have a ton of shop space. That's a really great tool to just have around because it serves multiple purposes, and that's always a good thing. Anyway, as for brands that I only have a few items of, Powermatic is probably one of my favorites. So Powermatic is one of those brands that's really hard to get where I am in Canada. There's only one retailer that can import it for us, and it is bloody expensive, as most Powermatic tools are anyway. But when you bring in those import fees and all that, it can get kind of crazy. So this little mortiser has been awesome. It does have some issues, but stuff that I've talked about in other videos, not worth going over now. I'd have no issue trusting the Powermatic brand name. I think it is a pretty good brand, and I probably will buy more Powermatic stuff in the future if I deem that that's the best course to go down. Again, it's expensive to bring up here, but it may be worthwhile in some cases. And then the main focus for the past, well, a few weeks anyway, is the Makita track saw. So Makita, again, another one of those brands that I really do like. I also have a pin nailer made by Makita, and again, really love this thing. So Makita is one of those brands that I want to get more of. I have a whole bunch of their stuff on my wish list. I want to get a brad nailer from them, and there's a couple other pneumatic tools I want to get from them. I also really want to get their 12-inch miter saw. It's by far the best looking one on the market, I think, anyway. Makita is just one of those brands that I want to get more of. I've been really impressed with the track saw. I love this pneumatic pin nailer. Overall, again, Makita is just one of those brands I like it. You know, I plan to expand more into it. So I'm sure there's certain brands that you guys are probably wondering out. You know, what about Festool? What about Milwaukee? Those two brands are ones that I really do like. I actually have a Milwaukee tape measure that, again, I specifically went to Home Depot, looked at all the different tape measures there, and just went, okay, the Milwaukee one is the best because it's got this like auto locking feature that prevents the tape measure from biting your fingers off, which is freaking awesome. I love my Milwaukee tape measure. When I was looking at the drills, I was kind of going between Milwaukee and DeWalt. You know, I was kind of bouncing back and forth there. But overall, the DeWalt was the one that was easier to get because I didn't have to go and find someone to unlock a cage. Whereas with the Milwaukee, I had to do that, and so I ended up with the DeWalt. Anyway, like I mentioned, Festool. Festool is one that I want to get into in the future. You know, I'm kind of between the Festool and the Mirka for the sanders. Still, they'll have to do more research there to figure out what's actually worthwhile and save up a hell of a lot of money to buy either one of them. So I'll just kind of leave this as an open-ended question here. Obviously, if you guys have seen my videos, I've had a lot of other brands of things pop up in the videos. So if you guys have any questions about tools you may have seen in my videos, certain brands that I like or I dislike, or just generally my opinions on things, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. So like I said, I don't really have a whole lot of time in the shop today. So I'm going to just finish it off by getting the shop nice and clean. But yeah, I do appreciate you guys joining me today. It was kind of fun to just go through and look at some of the different brands of tools now that I have. Again, there's so many other things in the shop here that are just, you know, I could talk about every little thing, but it would be like a 6-hour long video. Nobody wants to watch that. So as always, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the Ryobi. You'll see lots of Ryobi in the background. That is not really a brand that I like. It's not great. Same, both Mastercraft and Ryobi, brands that I don't particularly like their tools very much. It's not that they're bad, it's just that they're entry-level tools and they just don't perform to a level I like. So you'll notice that I'm replacing most of those Ryobi tools you'll see in the background with better tools. You know, Ridgid, DeWalt, eventually Festool maybe, Makita, all these Bosch, all these other tools that'll come in and slowly replace the green, because for one, that's just a hideous color, and two, they're just not that great of tools. So